Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of the Ademola Bookmen Podcast. I'm John Coughlin, joined by my friend Al Bond, and today we are continuing with Ian Wright's Life in Football. Here we go.
Did you know his background was Caribbean?
No, I don't think I did.
I didn't realize he was like a first generation English guy as well. Like his mother, was he born in Jamaica or was he born in England? Sorry, I can't even remember.
No, he was born in Woolwich, for Woolwich Arsenal. So it all ties in.
So sorry.
But
So his mother came over, and he was born in England. His mother came from Jamaica. He doesn't name his stepfather, I think, in the book, and
No.
his father is more or less a non-entity in the book. I think he left when he was 2. So
Yeah.
so the details there are sparing, although his stepfather was Jamaican. But yeah, his mother came when and left one kid in Jamaica who came later, and he describes him as being really Jamaican, whereas him and his other brother Morris, who's also older than him, as being English. You know, well, they're born in England. Well, Ian was certainly born in England.
Yeah, and they all had to share a bed, which sounds very uncomfortable.
That's
Whereas
right.
we're all jabbing him every time he moved, like, because he was the little one. He moved over to Morris, whack. He moved over to his big brother, whack.
Yeah, and just an unhappy home life. His stepfather being the word he used for his home life was horrible, and his stepfather didn't work. He was gambling, smoking weed all day, and was abusive, I think, physically and obviously pretty horrible in terms of verbal and emotional abuse. He paints a pretty horrible picture of his stepfather having match of the day on and not allowing him and Morris watch it, but allowing them hear it, which is just weird, cruel treatment, isn't it?
Sociopathic, angling the television away. I mean, that's right. I mean, I just can't get my head around that. I mean, people get angry at stuff. I mean, maybe he was an asshole, but just withholding this pleasure he could give these kids, it costs him nothing. Yeah, it just sounds like an absolutely abysmal sort of fella.
Yeah.
And who then only got worse when his mother gave birth to Dion by his stepfather, Dion being his sister, who he does not have a kind word for, not at all.
No. So yeah, he says essentially that the stepfather would, always take this, like, just treated him very differently than his own biological child, and she kind of, from a very young age, took advantage of that and would use every opportunity to kind of get Ian in trouble. And it sounds like he lived in like abject terror of his stepfather. And it's, yeah, again, when you think about Wright and how he comes across as this incredibly warm, humble, quite lovely man, that he came from this just dreadful situation is really quite incredible.
Well, he talks about when he took on Sean Wright Phillips as his son. And now Sean Wright Phillips is not biologically his son, and Bradley Wright Phillips is biologically his son.
Yeah.
But as he says, he never treated them differently. Never, never, never. Even though his whole family would be like, why are you giving Sean the same as you're giving Bradley? He just rose above it, right? He wasn't drugged down by it. He just did the right thing. Again, I've said that by accident again, but yeah, he took how he felt, and rather than replicating it so often it can happen, he chose never to be like that and chose Sean as treated Sean as his son. Again, he just sounds like a decent fellow, a really decent fellow.
Yeah, like this is a guy who left school when he was 14, he's, this incredible, as you say, maturity and the capacity. I think those kind of patterns of I haven't got a clue what I'm talking about, I guess, ultimately, but I believe the patterns like that do repeat often. And not in the case of Ian. He was able to flip it on its head and use it as a way, as a kind of an inspiration to be a decent man. His mother, who he continued to be great to, and who he said went to one match in his career, and she would get drunk and tell him that, like, when he was a small child, that she should have had an abortion, or termination was the term she used. It's like, what kind of a upbringing, the poor fellow. Dreadful stuff.
Yeah, that's it. No encouragement at all. Many called, few had chosen. She told him all the time as a kid about being a footballer, so he never really believed it.
Yeah,
it sounds. And what did he? First thing he did when he turned a professional, bought her a house. First thing he did.
Unbelievable.
God bless you, Wrighty.
God bless you, Wrighty. He did like Morris. That's one thing to know. He had a lot of time for
Yeah,
Morris.
there is something I wanted to say about that, because again, it's a very generous take. It's like Morris always told him, "You're not good enough. You'll never make it. You're not good enough. You'll never make it." And then he did make it. And he played, I think he scored a hat-trick for whoever it was. And he went and told Morris, "You're teasing, maybe make it." And Morris loved that. I bet he did. Again, a very generous interpretation of a fact. "You'll never make it. You'll never make it." You telling me I'll never make it spurred me on. Thank you, son. It's a very generous interpretation which Ian Wright gives Morris.
Yeah, I think it must be tough for an older sibling who's obsessed with football to see their younger, annoying brother realize their dream. Yeah, that must be rough. That must be hard to take. But he did like Morris, and Morris seems to have been his only ally, really, maybe growing up. But the thing about
he did seem to have a lot of cousins and aunts who he would spend time with, though, right? There's an extended family which I think he could rely on.
He said that he just spent so much time away from home because he just didn't want to be there, and that's when he was playing football. That's what he did all the time. Played football. He said that other kids on the estate had bicycles, but his mother and stepfather had no money to buy bicycles, so him and one other kid used to just stick around playing football, which is all very sad stuff. And I suppose, like I said, Morris was his only ally, but I guess he found a lot of solace in football, which is a nice thing in a way.
Morris was really good to me, and I'll look after him until the day he dies. Oh, Wrighty. Oh, Wrighty, lad.
We'll be signing up for the Ian Wright fan club.
He's always so generous. He's generous to his mother. The way that she says, it must have been hard for her coming over here and she felt sorry for herself. That made it, but always very, very generous. I just want a quick reference here. He's hanging out with his friends. The three of us were out of it, and we went to see Scarface. I don't know if it was because of the state I was in, but it left a profound impression on me, and all I could think about was how it ended for Tony Montana. I came away thinking from that, hang on a minute, this guy's the baddest guy I've ever seen as a character in fiction, and he still didn't make it. What chance have I got if I want to go down that road? Find the film Scarface is some sort of morality lesson. It's just wonderful. It's certainly not what I took from that movie. It's not what I took from it. It's like going, oh no, makes me think. Maybe I won't be a Cuban drug lord in Miami, because maybe it's not going to end out well. I just thought that was lots of fun. Like, he watched Scarface and he thought
the cautionary
Scarface. This is a lesson for me.
The cautionary tale of Tony Montana.
He learned something from it, so good for him. Good for him. I also like how he said he was drinking lager and lime, and he just thought he's the coolest thing ever. Yeah, man, lovely lager and lime makes me thirsty.
So okay, as a kid, he didn't love school. He was good at French because he liked mimicking people. He said in school he had some nice role models, and I think significantly for Wright to have father figures. He talks about this a couple of times in the book. And I think it's documented widely that he had a good relationship with one teacher in particular.
Mr. Pigden. Folks, if you're listening to this and you've never seen Ian Wright's reunion with Mr. Pigden, it is I'm tearing up thinking about it. It's the most lovely thing you could ever watch in your life. So this Mr. Pigden really took an interest in it, young Ian, built him up, told him he could be something. He was the first guy that ever really gave him that father figure. Anyway, for some reason, they were reunited, and Ian Wright didn't even know that Mr. Pigden was still alive. And he's sitting there in the video. He's sitting in a football ground somewhere. And there's this voice behind him like, all right, Ian. All right, Ian. Turns around. He's like, Mr. Pigden, I thought you was dead. Mr. Pigden's like, thought I was dead. That's what he says. That's what he says. He thought I was dead. But you can see Wrighty. He whips off his cap. He's wearing his was it newsboy cap, but he always wears, and he whips it off because it's the respect he shows for Mr. Pigden. And Mr. Pigden by this time is just an old London geezer. But it is a beautiful video, absolutely beautiful. And
I saw it as well. I watched it the other day too, funny enough.
Not a dry eye in the house.
Yeah, it's very sweet. It's very sweet. I thought you were dead. That is very funny, isn't it? I thought
you was dead.
That's what all.
He thought I was dead, he says.
That's what all older people want to hear. So what I thought was really fascinating about this book, actually, and this was, this whole Afro-Caribbean side of London, and just this kind of like parallel world that was going on. Like, and then I looked, Viv Anderson played for England in 1978. So, and then he describes all these amazing players playing in these like all black Sunday League teams. And he says when he went to play for Arsenal or whatever, he could have named, or when he went to Palace, there was like 15 lads he knew from over the years who used to play in this all black competition who were better than any of the guys he saw there. And just from a sporting point of view, but also the stuff he talks about the whole milieu of Brockley, where he's from, and Peckham and Brixton and Camberwell. I thought all that stuff was really, really, really interesting.
Yeah, me too. And again, as I say, as an Englishman, not that much younger, but it was a world I knew nothing about, just nothing about. Yeah. He talked about this tournament, the Super Malt Cup, right, which was a collection of black teams who joined play, and it just sounds like an incredible event. It just sounds wonderful. It just sounds wonderful. And there's a story, and he turned up for his team, and he was absolutely brilliant. The next week, he was out and about, and he was wearing a big gold chain, and he calls it being taxed, but these lads were trying to steal it from him. They had their hands round, and then there was just this figure going, leave him alone, my little football friend, leave him alone. Yes. It's just like how he got that respect through football, how people through London knew who he was because he was so good at football. It's a great little story.
Yeah, he says it's kind of the first time that he realised that people were taking note of him, right? This guy was just some random Caribbean guy, I guess, who told him then that he'd been watching him in that Super Bowl. That is a nice story. The next bit in my notes is his life of crime.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So this was very unfortunate. As he says, Ian, he had a car, but he never had any tax or insurance, and he would go around driving and accumulating different driving fines. And then at one point he had the money and he thought, okay, well, I'll go and pay these fines. So he just turned up to the police station saying, hey, I'm here to pay fines, where he was arrested for non-payment of driving fines and put in prison. And he wasn't for very long, a couple of weeks, right?
A couple of weeks in Chelmsford prison. I say a couple of weeks in prison.
As I say, yeah, exactly, a couple of weeks. Yeah, I'll just a couple of weeks. I'll be all right. That'll be fine. Let's do some push-ups. But yeah, and that's it. He kind of walked into it, but again, this just reaffirmed to him that this was somewhere he was never going to end up.
Yeah,
but he came pretty close times, right? I mean, he was running for his just through association with people, but as if that would help him.
Yeah, and he had a kind of a come to Jesus moment, I think, in a sporting sense, in the prison. Realized, and again, he had left school when he was 14, and by the time he was 15, he was like he was doing full-time labor on construction sites. So, I guess of all those guys playing in that Super Malt and these 15 kids that he talked about who were amazing and better than anyone he saw at Palace, I guess maybe some of them did end up working and like in jobs like that. But luckily for Ian, it went in a different direction. But certainly at that point in his life, he's got, I suppose, he's been overlooked all throughout his youth, and he's kind of given up. But it's in prison that he decides that he's gonna try again.
Yeah. And don't you think this is all, if he'd had like a strong role model there, a dad or someone, he wouldn't have been overlooked all those times. He always had to be his own advocate. And I think someone else there, obviously his talent was apparent for all to see. And if he just had someone there pushing him through, talking to the right people, as he said, Ian, he never knew what to do or what to say to people. He was unsure when he was first turned semi-professional. He didn't know who to ask for the money. He was shy, which seems difficult to believe.
He said that when he was at Palace and he wanted to stay after training, like he asked if he could use the balls, he's, as you say, he's a sweet guy. And the man's like, well, yes, you can use the balls.
And he said that was a huge moment, right? He had 30 balls all to himself and he could just practice and practice and practice. Yeah. I mean, that must have been a big moment. You've one ball, you kick it, you got to chase it. Now he had 30 and he could get the youth team involved, they cross and stuff. Yeah, he was a super professional, even though he didn't know he was being a super professional, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, and do you think that maybe, it's also a product of time and place? Like South London, I think, and the Paris suburbs are the two biggest hothouses for young football talent, like real top level footballers. So this world that he talks about with this super malt was just, I guess, overlooked largely. Obviously, there were like people like the Wallace brothers were from around that part of the world, I think, and they got spotted. So there was some that were getting picked up, but maybe if he was a little bit earlier, he wouldn't have been seen at all, and maybe if he was a bit later, he would have been seen quicker. Like people like Rio Ferdinand and Anton, they're from Peckham, right? They're from around that part of the world as well. So maybe
that's right. But it's only in the last 10 years though that South London has really been exploited for these players. Now your Bukayo Sakas and the like. I mean, now it really is. It's the envy of all of Europe, right? I believe.
Yeah. So as you say, he nearly got arrested a couple of times where he was kind of running around the fellas who were up to no good, and he kind of was being dragged into some bad groups at times. But like he says at one point that he was afraid of this fella, he was afraid of that fella, and then he came to realize that people were just playing a role, and that was how they would try and get respect, by being tough guys and all the rest of it. And it's like, there is incredible, I don't know if it's humility or whatever, but he's very kind to people. And he says like people who he was terrified of later on, he's like, they were just doing what was all they could do.
Yeah, it's a front in a tough world, and that's it. And to get by in that world, again, from my little middle class perspective, it's a world that I know nothing about.
Did you notice any difference in how he referred to his unrequited love, Jacqueline Graham, and his first long-term partner, Sharon? And the clue is in how he just described them.
No, go ahead, Johnny.
Well, he talks about Jacqueline Graham. Firstly, he gives her full name. She's the most beautiful girl I ever saw, la la la. And he was trying to get with this girl for a long time, and she was too polite to tell him no, and she was kind of leading him along. And then some of his buddies eventually got her to tell him that she wasn't interested. And then he's like, and then I met Sharon, and we settled down. It's like whoa. Sharon,
and he was happy with that because he didn't have to ask any more girls out. So lucky him.
That was funny. And Sharon being the mother of Sean, and then the mother of Bradley as well. But coming out of prison, and he got picked up by Palace. He said it was a 3-month contract. He was spotted, and he says that it was a blessing that it was kind of short term, because he just kind of realized that he wanted to just enjoy it for the period that he was there, and it made him work really, really hard. And obviously things went very well for him there, and he, as well as being a club legend at Arsenal, I think he's a club legend at Palace. But I think more broadly speaking, I read a little bit about, having read that stuff about about South London. I think he's quite an iconic figure in South London, just Afro-Caribbean football circles, generally speaking.
Yeah, I'd say so.
You mentioned Rocastle earlier. Rocastle kind of maybe came to fame beforehand, but Wright's profile, I guess, ultimately exceeded his buddy Rocky Rocastle.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was super famous. Yeah, he was. I mean, I remember him from being at Palace, and this was when I was a young kid, but the Wright and Bright front line, they were devastating, and everybody knew that.
I like the way he talks about Mark Bright. Mark Bright was obviously a bit of a square.
Yep. But again, he says it with such warmth and admiration, right? That's it. It's like Wrighty would be dancing. He's sort of like swaying and nodding, and they'd be putting on all their super moves and the thing. Well, I'm looking forward to getting through to the music part, because that's where Wrighty really comes alive.
Just on the Palace stuff, when suddenly he finds himself on a club trip to Qatar, he doesn't know that he's going to be selected, because I guess he's still a new player, and he's named on the list, and somebody mentions it in a way to show that they're surprised that Wright is mentioned. But he had no passport, he'd never been on a plane, he'd never been in a hotel. It's
no, God bless him.
Yeah.
I was also telling him that he managed to turn up and get a passport in one fucking day. Good luck nowadays. Good luck with that.
And then there was another story where he was smoking weed at the time, and the drug tester showed up, and he was still on this short-term contract, and the drug test, he didn't know that this was even a thing, and the drug testers are going around after the match, and they're calling the names, and it's Mark Bright, like Wright wore 8 later on, but I think he was wearing 10, so it was like number 9 Mark Bright, number 11 whoever it was, and they just somehow skipped Wright. Oh, that's lovely, isn't it?
I know, that's it. I had butterflies in my tummy for him right there. Like, yeah, all going to come crashing down over that one silly little thing.
Yeah.
And he never smoked another joint again. Never, ever to this day.
So yeah, okay, let's talk about I like that whole scene that he describes about, well, first there's 2 sides to it, isn't there? Like, there's the kind of the fairly raw scenes that he talks about the kind of music clubs around where he's from, and then it gets a lot more bougie when he goes to hang around with the players in Kensington. Well,
it's a really interesting chapter. It's regrettably called Uptown Funk, which dates it horribly, doesn't it? But at the time. But yeah, it was absolutely magic, the music. And I was just thinking to myself, I couldn't love Ian Wright more. Oh, you love Prince? Yeah, you do, lad. Yeah, you do. Yeah, so he talks about going to the dance and blues club, the Rastafarian clubs, but everyone was very vexed, as he writes. And it was a scene that he wasn't really into, because that's the thing with Wrighty. On the pitch, very, very aggressive, but in his day-to-day, he tries to avoid that at all costs. He started getting into the music such as like Parliament, Funkadelic, Light of the World. And that, to his brothers, was Banner music, which is short for Banachek, a 1970s TV detective. But basically, this was like being called an Oreo cookie, like brown on the outside, white on the inside. But I just think it's very interesting that in that time in London, listening to like Parliament and Funkadelic was considered to be very, very white. And he should have been listening to the reggae music from his back home.
Yeah, and like, I suppose he talks about how, these kind of clubs that they would hang around in Peckham and places like this, I guess, where they're, I guess they were rough, but they were their own thing, I suppose, ultimately. And that was kind of what made it so special. And he said, there was one that he used to go to that was all Caribbean people, but it was out the back of a white pub. All these old white dudes in the front of the pub, all these old racist white dudes. I think he kind of, if he doesn't say explicitly, he certainly implies as much, but then out the back, this is what's going on. But yeah, I think he starts to get worried that he's going to be dragged down by this scene a bit. But then again, in true Wrighty fashion, he starts saying, but it was the people there who were encouraging me to, you got to be home, Ian. You've got a game in the morning. you know.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like the whole community was looking out for him at this point.
It's nice if that is how it was. That's a pretty nice picture. And then so this kind of coincides with when he's at Palace with other, I guess, mostly black Londoners, but like I said, Bright is from the north, and I guess he kind of transitions from being around Brockley, because he said it was a bit awkward because if you bought people drinks, they'd call you Flash, and if you didn't, they'd call you Tight, essentially. And then he didn't like the guff that he was getting, so he just kind of drifted away a bit and started hanging around in Kensington a bit more in the clubs where like George Michael was going.
Yeah, that's it. He took a step up real quick, didn't he? Like before you knew it.
Yeah.
I see he also hung around with like he go out. A core of us who used to rave together. Tony Finnegan, Andy Gray. I wonder which Andy Gray that is. I didn't look it up. I mean, there's about 3 Andy Grays. Mitchell Thomas, Mark Bright.
It's obviously not the Scottish Andy Gray, because he does talk about him being a stylish black man. So it's not that Andy Gray.
No, there was an Andy Gray subsequently who played, which is also not that Andy Gray. There's a few Andy Grays out there, I think.
Okay. 50 Shades of Andy Gray.
Lovely.
Yeah. Like, so he talks, I did listen to some of the songs. The names were good. There's like Bad Bobby Glover. I like that.
Yeah.
But I would describe that music as being like kind of slowed down and quite sentimental, but it slowed down, that certain kind of punk elements to it, but slowed down and pretty sentimental. It wasn't really for me.
Fair enough.
And what disappointed me, anytime I hear people talking about music and they're like, I love music and all the rest of it, it's like, but now music has to mean more to me. And if I had to pick 2 songs now, do you know?
Yeah, now this is, yeah. Well, obviously, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, this kind of broke my heart a little bit, to be honest. Like, all these great music. Oh, you love Prince. Like, you always put Prince on. Your 2 favourite songs are fucking what? Tell us what they are, Johnny.
What a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong.
I mean, okay, I guess.
And, of course, Imagine by John Lennon. That's really...
Imagine there's a world where that song hadn't been fucking written. That'd have been a better world. Like, Imagine. I mean, come on, son.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was a real heartbreaker. He named all this great stuff. Like, they're your 2 favourite songs? Those 2? Come on, lads. I don't even know if I believe that, to be honest. I think he's just trying to put out this world of peace and love. Like,
later on, like, he talked about like driving to Arsenal games, and he'd have a fire starter blaring out of the radio. That's more like it. Imagine.
Yeah, that's quite fun, isn't it? Like, again, dates it beautifully. Like, imagine him pumping that out. With his windows rolled down as he turned up to the Arsenal stadium. You'd just be down on your knees loving him. Like, there goes Wrighty, our boy.
Yeah.
Can we just talk a little bit about his fashion at the time? People used to laugh at him, like saying he looked like an old-time sticksman, one of those ruffian guys you get in blues dances. He was wearing Farrah slacks. I remember Farrah slacks in burgundy, multicoloured ballet shoes, probably with a little chain across them. I like that detail. And I may even have been wearing a suede fronted cardigan. Lovely. You paint a picture, Ian. I can see you like that.
Yeah. Did you listen to his song?
Oh, Do the Right Thing. I've heard it.
Do you know who produced that, or maybe wrote that?
No.
The other Pet Shop.
Okay, Kinder Waterman. Chris Lowe?
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah. It's not terrible.
I'm a big fan of the Pet Shop Boys. I believe Chris Lowe has my birthday. He's one of the famous people that does. Him and Tony Adams. It all ties in. Lovely stuff.
Look at that. That song's not terrible. As far as those football, you know what, they just cannot resist in the videos for those songs is having footballs in the videos, just bouncing around in the background. Let me tell you, Al, something that I didn't care much for in this book was all the talk about the TV stuff because I really don't care about that.
Right then. So this is subsequent to his playing career. Well, in fact, it was going along at the same time when he was at West Ham. Well, this is it. Not only do you not care about it, Johnny, but neither did he.
Maybe that's why. Yeah.
Although, may I just say, on his very first talk show, his guests included Denzel Washington, Will Smith, and fucking Beyonce. I mean, come on, lad. I mean, it is triple A list there. Like, he really got the big stars now. This was 20 years ago. But they were big stars then as well, right?
Yeah, and
imagine a chat show like, oh, we got Will Smith next week, it's Beyonce, and the week after that, Denzel Washington. That is fucking A-list. No wonder Parkinson was so pissed off.
Yeah, Lionel Richie as well. And he gave.
Oh yeah.
He handed Beyonce her first ever platinum record. That's nice, isn't it?
It is nice, and apparently she was delighted with it.
Yeah, but I enjoyed that stuff about Parkinson. So Parkinson got really ratty about it, and was like essentially having to go at Wright because Wright, he's not. I guess he wasn't
not a journalist. No, I mean, I read the piece, and it was very, very grumpy. It was very bad tempered, and I think spoke of a different age, frankly, where people stayed more in their box, stayed more in their lane. He did not like other people trying to take his. Yeah, I mean, that's it. I've only ever heard nice things about Michael Parkinson, but that does not reflect very well on him.
Yeah, and this is what Wright ultimately didn't like about television was it was just really fickle, and the show was doing really well. I liked Parkinson writes this thing attacking Wright's show, and then Trevor McDonald calls him up and is like, don't you worry about Parkinson. If they don't like it, it's their fucking problem. And there's Wright shocked by Trevor McDonald cursing. That was quite a nice little detail. But then, yeah, it was fickle, and ITV, and I guess this really dates the show, started putting the news in the middle of the show. And then that was the end of it, really. It kind of lost momentum. Wright bounces around in all of these other TV shows, and they cannot resist you putting a pun in every single thing that he ever did on television. Right here, right now, right around the world, the Wright ticket, Friday nights, all right. It's like, oh, come on.
Yeah, they never make reference to Ian. Ian. I wanted to say this or podcast. It never even occurred to me until I read this book, and there was a bit where I think George Graham's going, Ian, you need to do this, and Ian, go over there. And it's like, who the fuck is Ian?
Yeah.
Ian Wright's called Ian. Like, it never occurred to me until I read the book that Ian Wright's first name is Ian.
He's the least likely Ian, isn't he?
He doesn't look like an Ian to me, son. He does not look like an Ian.
No.
And Ian looks like an old, I don't know, someone down the pub in a provincial county. Oh, what's Ian having? Oh, he's a bit, Ian's drunk.
You know what I thought must be so tiresome? He said that, Will Smith was on the show, and afterwards we had a great conversation in our dressing room about being the best we can be and inspiring people. It's like, whoa.
Yeah. Well, we often talk about that, don't we, Johnny? We often talk about how to inspire people and how to be the best they can be.
Sitting down and having a chat about it, being the best you can be, Al. And then he ended up live from Studio 5 with the embarrassingly poor Kate Walsh. And
Did you look up who Kate Walsh was?
Did you? Did you know?
Was it like? No, I did. No, I mean, I missed all of this. I don't remember any of it, to be honest. I remember him being on the Ant and Deck show, but that's it. Kate Walsh was, like all bad things in this world, an apprentice contestant. Is that right?
Oh, okay. I have no idea.
I should double check that. I did look it up, but she got famous from being on a TV show, but as he said, embarrassingly poor.
Yeah. Yeah, but like you said, that even though he liked the likes of Will Smith and these guys, ultimately, you get a call in the afternoon saying Will needs to go on now, like 3 hours ahead of schedule, and Mariah Carey needs her room to be decked out with a particular something, and I think eventually he was like, no.
I've never heard anything like that about Mariah Carey. What?
Yeah, funny that, isn't it? Yeah. He just had enough of him. And this, I suppose, he has a real axe to grind with agents, and that kind of goes on a bit, but because like ultimately he had these agents who kept him in light entertainment.
And wouldn't let him go back to football, right? They were insistent he doesn't do any football. That's to distance himself from that, which is just frankly weird, isn't it?
He was making the money, and I suppose that's where his gripe comes from, because they're just instrumentalizing him towards their own ends. But what I did like is when he started talking about agents in football. And of course, this is not a huge surprise that football agents are, money men, in it for themselves, scumbags, all the rest of it. But he did give interesting detail maybe about the extent to which they run football. Mendes, the Mina Raiolas of the world.
Well, absolutely. Players don't even scout players anymore, right? We just say, what do you got for... teams don't even scout players. They just ask, what do you got for us?
Yeah, you can imagine just like idiot chairman thinking they're getting good advice from the likes of Mendes, as he's like, yes, we still have Cristiano Ronaldo, if you'd like to take him, so that was interesting. But then also his role as as this iconic black guy from South London, how agents would try and roll him out to speak to aspiring footballers from a similar background.
Yeah.
So what he says is that how it works is that the size of contracts means that agents will throw loads of money at kids, and that they, like, if they get 1 in every 10, if one of them makes it in every 10, they can really it'll pay, one player will pay for them essentially tapping up 10. And he just talks about a fairly, I guess a very cynical world where fellas are just essentially getting them to sign on and then fucking them over in the long run if nothing happens for them.
Yeah, there's nothing new there. Everybody knows that nobody likes football agents. We all know how much money they make. But it was an interesting chapter.
Well, what I thought was interesting was how, and he explains that it was a new thing when he was a professional for people to have agents. And he just describes how it just really played into people's egos. Oh, call my agent will deal with that. How ultimately these guys, this whole industry has insinuated itself into a world just as a result of the egos of footballers. And he says that, like, old school managers, he mentions Ferguson, just hated agents and wouldn't deal with them. But obviously deal with them they must at this point.
Well, you get it though, right? I mean, it must be very seductive, the fellow going here who is asking all the difficult questions you don't want to ask, changing your fucking light bulbs for you. I mean, I get it, right? And I can only assume every player has an agent now. I can't imagine there's anyone who represents himself anymore.
Just returning to the issue of race quickly, Al. He was the 16th black player to play for England. And there've been 106. But can you imagine, he was the 16th black player to play for England. Vardy was like the 17th Leicester player to play for England, Imagine just this, just generations of fellas who didn't get looked at as a result of the way things were set up. Because, this is quite famous in the US with, different leagues and all the rest of it, but it's not something that I had stopped to think about in how it worked in football. But there you go. And he says that 30% of footballers in England, when this was written, 2016, were black. 3% of coaches in boardroom were black. So he asks himself if things have gotten better or worse, and he says both. Dressing rooms are much better. They're more diverse, and even the white guys in the dressing rooms are a lot more, used to being around people from minority backgrounds. So it's a much different vibe there. But he says it's every bit as bad or worse, he thinks, in terms of the control of these things like top coaching positions and the boardroom and all the rest of it. And what he says, interestingly, he had these gripes with his agent, but he regrets not going into coaching, and he blames the agent for that because the agents wanted to keep him in light entertainment. But he regrets not going into coaching simply for this reason. To have he would have liked to have, set an example, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this chapter as well, there is a very uncomplimentary passage with Alex Ferguson accusing Ian Wright of playing the race card, when that is just not the Ian Wright way, is it? It's just not the Ian Wright way. That's so Schmeichel.
Okay, remind me. So what happened?
So there we go. It started in November 1996 during a game up at Man United when I went in for the ball. He thought I was a bit late. He grabbed the ball, jumped up and yelled at me, "You fucking black bastard." I didn't really see it until I watched football that night. But then a lip reader got involved, and he said to himself, "Let's see what the PFA do about this." But of course, the PFA, under Gordon Taylor, did absolutely nothing. The newspapers started to make a big deal about it, calling Schmeichel a racist. And Paul Ince was trying to broker something between them. Ferguson got Maurice Watkins involved, the solicitor of the FA Premier League legal advisory group. And he said nothing at all. But because Manchester United wanted to protect Schmeichel, it got festered and it festered. And then became the so-called tackle. Yeah, the papers were loving it. Arsenal, Manchester United, black, white. One journalist even tried to make out the confrontation happened because of Schmeichel's Aryan looks. It was a different time.
Well, like that doesn't kind of I don't recall there being that kind of reputation hanging around Schmeichel in recent years. Like, as in, he, like, when you think of how Suarez is viewed compared to Schmeichel, he seems to have just been absolved. No.
Yeah. Oh, completely.
Just listen to his podcast. And one of them was talking about Vinicius and what that guy is going through at the moment, or has been in the last few months. Like, just crazy stuff. What's happened to him in Spain?
Yeah, well, that is crazy. And everyone in Brazil thinks Spain's a massive racist country now.
So, like,
in Brazil think that.
Right kind of describes how, in the moment that Vinicius, where he's talking about one particular game, Vinicius is coming off, and he says, as somebody who's kind of experienced that, you're surrounded by people and you're just incredibly alone. It was quite like, it must just be like, to have thousands of people, or however many people are involved in the actual racism, I don't know, but it must be really shocking stuff.
Yeah, but Vinicius is fearless, right? I mean, this is why it's so great. He's absolutely fearless, and he's got the right of Real Madrid behind him now. I mean, he would just call him out, right? It's like pointing him in the crowd, like this guy, that guy.
Will he stay in Spain though?
Where else did he go? England? Oh, Saudi Arabia. I mean, just one thing here, and I know this is written 6 or 7 years ago, but he talks about he doesn't have that much money. He has a big tax issue. He's not as rich. He missed the big money football years, which is more pertinent than ever with Saudi Arabia, crikey. But I guess he's made a pretty decent living now, right? I mean, he's on TV all the time.
It's always a bit boo-hoo. Like, I remember reading Cascarino's book. That was like it's like an accountant's book. The book is actually quite good, but half of it is about how much money he made and how much he would have been making if he had written that book at the time, if he was playing at the time he wrote the book. It's like, Christ alive, you know, at any time these guys were playing, they were making crazy money compared to what everyone else was making. You know,
I mean, certainly in the case of Cascarino, I mean, maybe he wouldn't be at top level. You know what I mean? Maybe Cascarino would have been a very good champion striker in the modern world, like.
But Cascarino was a hairdresser, and then he became a professional footballer. So whatever he was making more than he was when he was a hairdresser.
No, he surely is, and that's right. And that's it. And it's just because, I'm not making $500,000 a week, boo-hoo. You're quite right.
He talks about how it's hard to retire, and a lot of people struggle with it. And he says that anyone would find it difficult to retire when they're 30. I was thinking, I'm not sure everybody would agree with that, Ian. It's like, I think quite a lot of people would be happy to retire in their 30s. So, you know, I don't mean to be unsympathetic or whatever, but when football books go in that direction, I have, you know, obviously a lot of them have serious problems. He talked about Adams and what all that Adams has done for people with like addiction issues. So it's not to be unkind, but you know, people in every walk of life deal with addiction issues as well, you know. So I think
that's absolutely right.
It's I have limited sympathy, you know.
Yeah, but what do the PFA do more? Who's there to do fucking anything for me? Nobody. Like, yeah, that's it. Most normal people go through their life. They don't have they don't ask the union to come and help them out with all that. But sure, I absolutely agree with you there.
What do you reckon now? Are we sticking with Skittles vodka, or how many prematurely unveiled 179 shirts out of 5 would you give the Ian Wright book?
I would give that 4.5 split penises out of 5. Like, I think it was an excellent book. Let's say 4 split penises out of 5.
Okay.
It's a definite hard recommend. I would recommend anyone read. It's certainly if you have an interest in football.
Yeah, I maybe not quite as high as you. 3.5 maybe.
3.5 split penises. That seems low.
Three full penises and one split Steve McMahon penis. And the reason being, I would take a few marks off. It's like, I think that stuff about the television goes on, and I think maybe it was a bit on the long side, but there was maybe parts of that book. There's a depth in that book maybe that you don't get in very many football autobiographies, certainly the ones that I have read. But I want to be like L'Equipe and be tough with my marking.
All right, I think you're right. Okay, I think the first 2 parts of the book, 4 split penises. The last third of the book, 3 split penises. All right, we'll give it a 3 3/4 split penises.
We'll split the difference. Yeah.
All right, lovely stuff.
Lovely stuff. Well, that's well, you know, whatever about recommending the book, I certainly recommend the man. What a tremendous chap that Ian Wright is.
A really super fella. Yeah, it seems like a good boy. We could all learn a little bit from Ian Wright. Lovely man.
A lovely man. But yeah, that's the. Oh, by the way, one other footballer from South London is, of course, Ademola Bookmen, who was raised by Nigerian parents in South London. I read today when I was reading the thing about Afro-Caribbean footballers in South London. But anyway, that's it. We are the Ademola Bookmen.
That's going to catch on.
Okay, but thank you very much. Thank you, Al, and thank you, Radio Land.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Let your body spin like the